And with that said, thank you,
Not
gurus. Namo, gurus. So, chapter 3 is about the spiritual master, one of the juiciest topics in Dharma. um,
the contributory cause.
yes. Yeah, so this is the final of the three main causes of enlightenment. The first two being Buddha nature, which everybody has automatically, and the second being that we talked about last week, being a precious human life. And so, having established that we have both of those things, the last thing you need is a spiritual master. Which, yeah, one thing I want to say, just starting off, is like, there's nothing magical or mysterious or special about any of what we're talking about right now, having a master. I mean, this is literally how everything in the world works. If you want to learn how to do something right, you need a teacher. You need
Yeah,
someone
any
who's mastered
skill
it.
or craft or art, you want to seek a master in that thing if you want to truly master it yourself. Yeah, it's definitely common sense.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful for people to connect to that. And I certainly do that when I'm reading this kind of stuff, because you can sort of get carried away into thinking, oh, this is something very spiritual, and like you need a spiritual guru, which is like somehow different or special than the way anything else in the world works. And it's not. It's just simply what you need to do. But of course, there's always confusion around that because of the ego and people thinking they can do it on their own. And,
We're
if
also
you, it's,
searching for the most slippery thing imaginable, like the hardest thing to master. And you're going to get lost over and over through no fault of your own and sometimes through fault of your own. And you need somebody to keep pointing the way for you. It just really is that simple.
you know what, on that note, let's go ahead and I guess we're going to skip around a little bit, but go right to one of the big parts of this chapter is giving three examples, they call them similes of why you need a spiritual master, basically. Um, so the first one is, I'm just going to read a little bit of this. A spiritual master is like a guide when traveling to an unknown place, like an escort when going to a dangerous place, and like a boatman when crossing a big river. So with the first one, when traveling to an unknown place without a guide, there is a danger of mistaking the path, of losing the path, or straying from the path. When a good guide is followed, then there will be no danger of mistaking the path, no danger of losing the path, and no danger of straying from the path. So I mean that's super profound right there, because and these things, these dangers that are listed are all literal things that can happen and do actually happen all the time. And there's all sorts of examples of people that have mistook the path. I mean, everyone is mistaking the path, basically. Almost everyone. Um, do you want to give
Yeah,
some examples?
even people on the path are mistaking it. And masters like Gumpopa even know this and put certain things in the text to take advantage of the ways that you might go off or things that might attract you that would otherwise pull you off. That's why I always appreciate stuff like or even similes like this because of their clarity. But even when there are more like fantastical allegories, like you can see the cleverness behind them if you know what to take seriously and what not to take seriously.
Dude, absolutely. It's like if you've ever gotten lost in the woods. If you've never been in the woods, then you might think, oh, it's like easy to find my way. You just follow the path and like, I don't know, remember what that tree looked like and you'll be able to find your way out. But if you try it, you realize it's not that simple. There's a million ways to get lost in the woods. Um, and that's how it is with Dharma, because I would say in fact, it becomes very experiential. The whole process of basically getting lost and needing to get brought back by the teacher.
That's basically what these other two similes are, also, right? It's more of the same thing.
Let's talk about the other two. Yeah. So the second simile is of a dangerous place which holds the threat of harm from robbers, thieves, wild beasts, and so forth. A little bit different than modern day analogies, but that's okay. When going to such places without an escort, there is danger to one's body, life, and wealth. With a proper escort, one can reach the destination without any danger. And again, it's the exact same thing. I mean, especially when you're doing tantra and people, there's kind of a thing going around where people say, "Oh, tantra's dangerous," and or people say like it's dangerous to practice tumo or like do stuff with energy, and that is true if you're not following a spiritual master.
Yeah, it
It
definitely
really
is.
is true.
If you don't have direction.
Yep. I mean, you can make yourself sick. You can mess up your body. You can mess up your mind. I mean, there are a lot of dangers. Um, and of course, it says here there's a danger of losing the favorable conditions of your life. And that's really important because that's the second requirement here in this book that they talk about as a cause for enlightenment. And if you're here listening to these Mahayana teachings, you have that precious life, and you don't want to mess it up because you're
Yeah,
not guaranteed to get it.
we've already gone over how difficult it is to get these conditions.
I was thinking about this last night when I was looking over this chapter again. Like, so in modern society, there's kind of this like what is it? I think of it like the X Games attitude, like let's go like ski jumping and exploring the backcountry and all this kind of like cavalier adrenaline junkie kind of activity. And of course, one aspect of that is like they have search and rescue teams. So if you go out in the backcountry, like there's a decent chance you'll get rescued if if something happens to you. But also you would only ever have you don't only go into something with that kind of attitude if you didn't have appreciation of the value of your precious life.
Yeah.
Because if you value your life, say you're taking your kids out on a hike like this, you would never like go without a map and extra water and a flashlight and all of this stuff that because you're aware of the dangers, and simply the way to do it is to have a guide. It's the way to do it safely. Or imagine going whitewater rafting without a guide, just like renting a raft and be like, no, man, I got this. I can do it. It's insane. Nobody who is serious about accomplishing something would ever do such a thing.
Well, that's what it's talking about in the third simile.
Okay, great. Let's get to the third simile. Yeah, yeah. Third simile, when crossing a big river aboard a boat without a boatman, you will not cross to the other side because the boat will either sink under the water or be taken by the river current. Dude, yeah, that's the best one because, like, I mean, and here they're talking about the river of samsara, but sometimes they talk about it like an ocean, and that's appropriate because there's no way you're just never going to find the other side without a guide.
Yeah.
So, um, and this is going to come up later in the chapter, but we want to discuss a little bit like um, these aren't so these are metaphors, but like they should be taken seriously. They're written down for a reason. Gampo didn't just say this to hear himself talk, right? He means it.
Yeah, it's pretty
If
hard
you
to get a clearer metaphor than this.
Yeah, I
To
mean,
take it even further, with a boatman, you will cross to the other shore by his efforts. Likewise, when crossing the ocean of samsara without a spiritual master to act as a boatman, then even if you enter into the boat of the holy Dharma, you will be carried by the current of samsara or will drown in samsara. Like it's literally not happening without the boatman.
Yeah. And I guess as we go through the book, we'll come across a lot of different, basically describe more of the dangers because we haven't really gotten into, and it may sound like we're just fear mongering, like, oh, there's so many dangers of getting lost, and people might be like, oh, that's bullshit, man. What could it possibly, I have meditation I got Dzogchen instructions from this book I got off Amazon. What could be the danger? But we'll cover that. There's it, yeah, it's real. So something that I want to just talk about because we haven't mentioned this in any of our videos yet, at least not explicitly. Trevor and we have a teacher, and Trevor, because I can talk about this. I know both of us can, but like, just to tangent for a second, where would you be without our teacher right now? Our teacher, Baba. Where do you think you'd be in terms of Dharma without him?
In terms of Dharma, um, I would still be in the pragmatic Dharma group or forum or something like that. I would still be a Sutrayana level seeker, most likely.
And how lost were you at that stage? Like, how dark is that place?
Well, that place is the lighter of the places to be. Like actively looking is not so bad. Without that, it would be worse. Yeah. There's no telling what I could have gotten into, but it would almost certainly be self-destructive.
And do you think? I mean, I'm trying to. Uh, you wouldn't have gotten anywhere near where you're at now without Baba. I think is safe to say.
It's safe to say. And even if I was the most fortunate I could possibly be, I would probably have taken like a decade to awaken.
Yeah,
But because of what he did with the 2PF and making it available, that whole possibly 10-year process or longer, depending, only took less than a week. And so bam, Sutrayana's over. Now it's on to the next step of things.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting point because it's so one of the things that's said actually in this chapter is with the spiritual master, we will reach our destination without wasting any steps.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because we're in this vehicle that we discussed, the precious human body. It doesn't last forever. It's going to die. It's actually doesn't last for very long at all. And you basically have to get the job, more or less, you have to get the job done within one life cycle. You want to finish before you die because if you don't, you come back and you got to try again.
Not only is this body impermanent, but the myriad of possibilities to even make it possible for you to hear it are impermanent and constantly changing.
For sure. So not only is it like a matter of you want to finish in this lifetime because if you don't, you have to try again, but that doesn't mean you'll even get a chance to try again in the next life. It might be many lives, especially if I mean, this is another topic, but you talk about squandering opportunities for Dharma. If you're in the position to practice Dharma and you have access to the teachings and you don't do it or you don't follow through, that's not going to be good. Let's just put it that
Yeah.
way.
It reminds me of another simile that just came to mind where samsara is the ocean in the middle of a hurricane. Like that's what you have. Those are the conditions of your mind generally. And the teacher is a buoy keeping you above water. The only way
Absolutely.
you can stay oriented and above water is to hang on to that thing. And
Absolutely.
that's what the precious teacher acts as.
Yep, no doubt about it. So in our lineage, and in I suppose most Vajrayana or tantric lineages, in addition to the three refuges that we take, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, we also take refuge in the Guru, and it's not actually different. I mean, the guru basically contains the three refuges as well, I would say, but it's very real. I mean, I can say from my experience, even though I did wake up before joining this lineage, I was still completely lost. Like, and and I was receiving other teachings. I went to other teachers and good teachers who I think were useful and good teachers, but I was still lost, and none of them were my teacher. They weren't my guru. But finding Baba and this lineage, um, yeah, I mean, it's like a lighthouse in a storm.
Yeah, it
And
is all of the difference. Not even some of the difference. It's everything, especially if you're tantra oriented.
yeah. So I just want to emphasize this because if anybody, dude, if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I could probably do this without a teacher, you can't. You can't do it. Anyway,
It's funny that you bring up multiple teachers because I think everybody has that. They may not all be dharmic teachers, but everybody finds teachers for something throughout our lives. And this chapter even has classifications on spiritual masters.
it does.
It
Let's
breaks them
skip
into
right to that.
four categories. So the ordinary spiritual master, the bodhisattva spiritual master who has attained certain bhumis, the nirmanakaya spiritual master, and the sambhogakaya spiritual master.
So, okay, what I want to make one point about this because it's not totally explicit. It's you kind of need to use context clues, but so with the ordinary spiritual master, we're still talking about a Mahayana spiritual master. So previously we talked about that you can attend like a solitary realizer spiritual master, but we're past that now. So we're talking about being in Mahayana, like we discussed, is the stream that gets all the way to complete enlightenment. Solitary realizer doesn't. The other kinds of masters aren't. So with an ordinary spiritual master, they're still what Gampopa talks about is even even somebody who isn't on the Bodhisattva bhumis, they need to have taken the Bodhisattva's vow and be within the Mahayana lineage. And so that's basically like the bare minimum. That's what they're saying is an ordinary spiritual teacher in this case is an expert in the Mahayana teachings and will not abandon the Bodhisattva's vow even at the risk of his own life. So this isn't just any old person. Um, I just want to be clear on that. So, I mean, in the Bodhisattva's vow is you vow to continue helping other beings until everybody's liberated. It's not until you're enlightened. It's until everyone is.
Right.
So, and that's the foundation of all, basically the entire Mahayana vehicle. So, um, do we want to talk about? We haven't come up to this topic yet in any of our videos, but the Bodhisattva spiritual master who has attained certain bhumis. I happen to know somebody who's attained certain bhumis. That would be Mr. Trevor sitting here.
Well, lots of our Sangha has attained
Yeah,
certain Burmese.
yeah, yeah. So even myself, I've attained the first bhumi. But yeah. Um, well, we're not going to talk about boomies right here, but that just means we have to talk about it real briefly, I guess. Do you want to say something? What is that?
I do want to say something about this section in that
Okay.
this is probably the first time in a Gampopa teaching where there's so much like spiritual jargon or like Vajrayana specific or Mahayana specific terminology.
Mm,
I'm not so sure that it's actually helpful to go over the Bodhisattva spiritual masters, except to provide context for what it is.
Okay.
And that, I can just read this first paragraph.
Okay.
Bodhisattva spiritual masters who have attained higher levels, from the first to the 10th bhumi, possess varying amounts of wisdom and purification. In particular, bodhisattvas who attain levels above the 8th possess 10 powers to benefit other beings: the power over life, mind, provision of necessities, cause or action, birth, intentions, aspiration prayers, miracles, wisdom awareness, and dharma. And it goes on to, it addresses each one of these 10 powers specifically, and I'd rather just leave that to reference because it requires a really like clear and high level of discernment to even understand precisely what it's saying. And I can just give you an example of that one. Like, right, so power over provision of necessities means one can shower down a rain of limitless necessities on sentient beings. I don't think that is meant for direct material interpretation, meaning somebody is manifesting food and whatever necessities to shower on anyone. I think it's speaking of it's speaking to a level of purification in that the intention to do so is pure and doesn't have obstacles. Like there aren't internal obstacles to realizing that for someone. Not that it will materially and literally happen. But that is just my interpretation at this time. I'd actually be pretty psyched to be wrong about that.
I guess I'll just mention briefly, and because we discussed this a little bit before we started recording, but our teacher has commented more than once about uh, the issue with some of these older Dharma texts, especially, well, they're all Eastern basically, but um, just cautioning people in taking it too literally, or thinking that because something is written a certain way, um, that you know exactly what it means in the context of this culture. Because keep in mind, I mean, and with Tibetans, like Tibetan culture is just very much more fantastical, I think, in the way that they talk about even just daily realities than people in the West. So our teacher always says, like, don't get caught up in thinking that these things are literally, and expect, oh well, this book says I'll be able to like make 1 million copies of my body. Uh,
Yeah, that comes
so
with what first Boomy or something like that in
yeah,
canon.
yeah,
You get some insane number of multiples of yourself,
yeah, yeah.
or maybe that's a later Boomy. I don't know, but you
Well,
know,
we have people in our sangha across the Boomies spectrum, and I haven't seen any of them making replicas of their body. At least maybe they're doing it in secret, but so
oh, there is one
yeah,
more thing
like
I'll say about that came to
go
mind.
ahead.
Isn't Gampopa like a 11th or 12th century master?
Yeah, I believe so.
And so there's something to be said, and this is said about Shakyamuni in the sutras all the time, that the teaching is like especially a text, but any teaching is specific to the audience and the time. And so when you have like fantastical sounding metaphors like this, even if they're designed to be interpreted literally, but they're designed to be interpreted literally for the people listening to the teaching at that time, not necessarily for people almost 1,000 years later.
Yep. So we are skipping around a bit, but um, well, something important about, so there's a couple pages here just about the different types of spiritual masters, like, which is what we're already talking about. And I don't I don't know that, like you said, I'm not sure it helps to go into too much more detail about that. But something I do want to point out at the beginning of this section is, and this was also talked about in terms of in the last chapter about basically the progression where, so if you don't have, say you don't have access to a Mahayana spiritual master, if you attend a somebody on a sutric level, you're climbing the ladder basically. If you do what's in front of you and what you have access to with authenticity and persistence and genuine desire to accomplish the Dharma, then that is what grants you access to the higher teachings, basically. And so Gampopa says that here. He says, when we're in the obscuring darkness of the karma of afflicting emotions, we have no opportunity to even see the face of a superior spiritual master. So how could we attend one? By meeting ordinary spiritual masters, receiving the light of their teachings and shining it on the paths, one will gain the opportunity to see the superior spiritual masters.
That is excellent.
Yeah.
And also something you would never know unless you're actually doing it. Like, that comes from experience.
Yeah. And I mean, that's even, well, we've seen it real time in our Sangha as well. I mean, because our teacher, when he started receiving the termas for our lineage, he was on the Bodhisattva bhumis. He wasn't a Nirmanakaya. He wasn't a Buddha at that point when he started. So, and he was receiving teachings from Sambhogakaya spiritual masters as well as physical masters here. But so everybody in the Sangha getting teachings from him and accumulating merit then got to have a higher, quote unquote, higher level teacher when he finished his purification. And, well, we won't go into the, I was going to use the Nirmanakaya terminology, but there's that terminology that's a little bit, can be confusing. But I think, what is the point in this? It's like, let's talk about the way the world is right now, because basically you can open up the internet and find Dzogchen teachings, which are the highest teachings. And so there's a bit, I think things are a bit different where historically, like I mean, if you could have lived in a village with a Dzogchen master and you would have absolutely no idea, potentially, that person was a Dzogchen master. So your karma is going to prevent you from ever even encountering these teachers. Now
Or
it
if
may
you
be a
like
little bit.
the merit and you see the teacher, you won't recognize him for what he is.
Mhm. Well, I think that mechanism is still in place today in the sense that you can have a realized teacher in front of you or a superior teacher, and somehow it's like you still won't, you just won't receive the teachings at that level. And I guess what I want to say about that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like anybody that's teaching Dharma, even if this is like a highly flawed teacher, say you find a highly flawed teacher, but you are genuine. If you are genuine and you have devotion and you listen to that teacher, you will earn yourself the merit to find a better teacher. Right?
Yeah, that is true.
So I guess the point is, like, we shouldn't be, I think there's probably a balance between like running around trying to find who you think is the highest teacher versus just finding a teacher and like practicing.
Yeah. And like you said, it just depends on where you're at or where you are at the time.
But that's something I love about Gampopa is one of the many things is it's like he doesn't want anybody to be stuck where they're at. He's always like, you can graduate if here's how you graduate to the next level. And I mean, I guess it's part of the sort of the magic of Dharma that it just works that way, that your karma kind of guides you, your merit guides you to what it is you need. But at least I guess I'm sort of putting my own spin on it. But to me, it's really just key that you like what's in your heart. If you're doing it, genuinely and from your heart, like you really can't go wrong. You're
Yeah,
going
if
to
you stay
accumulate merit.
sincere and you continue acting with sincerity, you can't help but wind up in the right place for you.
Yeah. So let's skip again. Um, Something I marked out here is so one who wishes to achieve the omniscient state should attend a spiritual master because of not knowing how to accumulate merit or how to purify obscurations. Um, in order to achieve the complete perfect Buddhahood, all the accumulations, including merit and wisdom, must be gathered. The means to do that depend on the spiritual master. All the obscurations, including the afflicting emotions and the subtle obscurations to enlightenment, must be purified. The methods to abandon these obscurations also depend on the spiritual master. So let's start. Let's break this down a little bit. I think the first thing I want to say is so not knowing how to accumulate merit or how to purify obscurations. I think something that I see in some of the Dharma communities these days is people, there's lots of texts and teachings about what is emptiness, right? Like what are the different levels of emptiness insight? And there's all this terminology out there. There's like no self, and there's emptiness of phenomena, and this whole slew of things. And I've noticed that people think that basically having some kind of insight into what that emptiness means, or having like, even if you have an experience like, oh, I experienced emptiness and it aligned with this one description of emptiness that I read in a Dzogchen book, and so I'm like at that level now.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. And that's what Gampopa is talking about here, because he doesn't say how to have insight into emptiness. He says how to purify obscurations. It's the purification that really, I think, people are not getting that. Now, in our
That's where
system,
the transformation really is the
yeah,
purification aspect. The insight's really context building, if nothing else.
and that is, um, I mean, you have to know this by experience, and that's true of all of this. But I can just say, without having the teachings from Baba, there's no. I've never heard anybody in anywhere else, no books, no anything, actually describe what purification is and how it works. Baba is the only person I've ever, and then people in our sangha who have learned from him, is the only one that has made this even remotely make any sense. What do you
Or
think about that?
accessible.
Yeah.
Like it is out there and it can be had, but you have to go through a lot to get it. Whereas it's pretty available in our sangha. There's
Good
no,
point.
there's no real paywall. There's no real obstacle. It's just basically, can you bring yourself to come hear the teachings, and can you bring yourself to practice? And you'll see for yourself. But for most places, there are hoops and preliminaries and things to go through.
Yeah, for sure. There's hoops, and then, I mean, the scary part is that you might go through all those hoops, taking years and years, only then to learn, or possibly you won't ever learn it, but it will turn out that your teacher's not that highly realized and doesn't actually know.
That's what I was just thinking. Because what a tragedy to go through all of that, and then you have an ordinary spiritual master. I would have been so upset.
Dude, well, I mean, it's how often does that happen? I mean, look how many, and we're not gonna start talking shit about lineages, but I mean, if you have a teacher that's 60 or 70 or 80 years old and has been practicing Dharma for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they haven't attained Buddhahood, it probably means they don't know how to purify their obscurations.
Yeah. They haven't,
And
or none of their students over that vast time have done it either. Is a red flag. But there will be lots of statements about not talking about attainment and how you really shouldn't grasp after these things, and it doesn't really matter precisely what enlightenment is, or any, you know how it goes. Keeping it vague and enticing.
well, that's just one of those traps in the ocean of samsara, and it's like, I mean, unfortunately, that's sort of how it is. It's like you get to the dock, right? Like you're trying to cross the ocean of samsara, and you show up at the dock, and there's a bunch of boats there, and a bunch of boatmen, and they all are wearing the fancy headdresses that make you think that they know what they're doing, and you kind of have no choice but to just try to get on a boat. But then you might be out in the middle of the ocean, and it turns out like, oh, sorry guys, I don't actually know where the other side is.
Yeah, I know how to paddle and I know how to look, but I don't actually know where we're going.
So, I mean, he says it. Like you said, you can't really get more clear than this. The way Gampopa is saying it, and I almost wonder if the fact that it's so clear, like the truth is so clear and easily stated, if you have wisdom, it's like you almost risk with samsaric beings. It's like not complicated enough for us to believe it.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, and so you have, and I mean, this is like part of the thing I think why there's like there's so many texts and then commentaries on the text, and the commentary is 5 times longer. It's like because you can't, if you have enough merit, you'll hear the teacher say something. You'll hear Gampopa say, the methods to abandon these obscurations also depend on the spiritual master. You'll hear it once and you'll never forget it and you'll follow it. But you have to be a very superior type of student to do that. Because I mean, I have to hear things many, many times.
Well, dude, that is a reflection of your merit. And I mean, I'm going to ruin your flow again. Hold on.
Do it.
Going back to the Bodhisattva spiritual masters, the power over Dharma means that in an instant, bodhisattvas can fully satisfy all the sentient beings according to their dispositions and in their different languages through words and groupings of letters based on many different types of sutras and so forth. So again, not necessarily a magical power. What that really is the master understands Dharma such that they can communicate it in whatever means necessary. Like they can help you to understand from their point of clarity through whatever means is necessary. And that is a reflection of wisdom. And if you're, as a student, if you have that level of merit, you will also be able to pull out pearls from all of the words and languages and different means that the best teachers use. A high merit student will hear the wisdom where others won't. So in that way, it's sort of like it is a two-way street on some level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the teacher, I mean, even the Buddhas can only point the way. The Buddha can't purify your karma. You have to do it yourself. So you always have to receive the instructions and implement them. Yeah.
Well, I said I ruined your flow, but in a way that sort of points us to the next
You didn't
section.
ruin you didn't ruin shit, man.
Well, it pointed us to the method on how to attend the authentic spiritual master.
Ah, yes. I Let's get to that part, but I want to say one more thing about this because this last line, I actually already read it, but The methods to abandon these obscurations also depend on the spiritual master. And where I want to go with that, I mean, there's probably different ways to understand that, but one of these is we're going to talk about Tantra, because Tantra, I mean, it's very literal. The Tantra depends on the spiritual master. I mean, this is like the whole, I mean, Vajrayana is guru centric. You can't just get, without going into the mechanics, and I don't actually understand the mechanics of Tantra that well, um, but um, it depends on the master. You can't have Tantra without a master. I don't know. They give you, they're basically like a link in the chain of teachings, and if you remove that link, you're no longer a part of the chain. You can't just get instructions from a master and then run off and stop listening to them, because they hold the keys to the car, basically, is the way I understand it.
Right.
And that's sort of how I take this line from Gampopa. They depend on the spiritual method, and Tantra is how you purify the obscurations. So, anyway, hopefully that's clear enough. Not too murky. Yeah, do we want to talk about attending a spiritual master? This is good. This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, we can cover the big parts and then break it down if you like.
Cool. This will be good for Westerners, arrogant
Yeah.
Westerners like us. Um, well, the three elements of attending a spiritual master, and I know we joke around a little bit, but this is really important. This is super important. Like,
Yeah, we've been
if you go,
setting the stage for this the whole chapter.
yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, I mean, Dharma is about, ultimately you're cleaning out your own mind, and if you have a bad attitude about any of this, that's in your mind, and that's hindering your progress. Like, if you have a bad attitude towards the guru, like, step one is fix that, in my opinion.
Or to put it in the Kabbalistic terms that we like, so if you have a will to receive that is not perfectly lucid, you're going to run into issues here.
Mm. And if it was perfectly lucid, what would that transform into?
Well, you would know precisely what it is that you needed to receive, and that would be the light of the teacher. So the
Yeah.
problem would sort of solve itself.
Mm.
You would know that you want to be like the teacher. You would want to transform it into the will to bestow.
Nice. So, and something else that could be said is like, and I think this is the case with a lot of Dharma, where possibly all Dharma, but on one level you might read this how to attend a spiritual master and think, oh, why should I follow these rules? Like, these are just like arbitrary, seemingly, it might seem like a cultural artifact or something arbitrary, but in my opinion, in my experience, all of these things naturally arise with devotion. And we talked about actually devotion in the last chapter too. So, all right. So anyway, the three aspects of attending the spiritual master are attending him through respect and service, attending him through devotion and reverence, and attending him through practice and persistence in the teachings. So, through respect, and some of these may actually be cultural, but in the external way we express respect. So, for example, they say doing prostrations, standing quickly, bowing down, circumambulating, expressing yourself with a feeling of closeness at the right time, gazing at him on and off without satiation. That's actually an interesting one because I think there's a natural inclination to do all of these things. You might not be inclined to prostrate. That could be interpreted as a cultural thing, but you will naturally find yourself wanting to do these measures of paying respects in the way that's natural to you.
Or at the very least would be willing to with openness. Like it wouldn't cause havoc in your mind to do one of these things.
For sure. But if it did cause havoc, that would be great because that's your ego. I mean, what else could it be if it's like I'm not gonna prostrate myself in front of this person?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
then he's not your guru.
Yeah, as long as you
um,
can't do that, he's not.
yep. Um, I love the gazing at him part because I think that's I don't know. I just like that. It's I guess I like it because I find myself doing it.
Yeah,
Like
without
you really
satiation,
do.
that's interesting.
Yeah, you don't get it's different than looking at anybody else, even like, looking at your partner, like you gaze at them because you find them attractive or whatever. It's not like that because that eventually, I mean, or like, I grow flowers, like I could go gaze at my prettiest flower that I have in my garden. I would get tired of it at some point. I'd be like, all right, I know what this flower looks like. I'm over it, but um it's almost like that lighthouse aspect. Like you want to keep your mind fixed on the guru. And I would say that's like, as you advance, that's a more and more advanced practice that you just don't waver off of thinking about the guru. And eventually thinking about the guru is the same thing as fusing your mind with the guru's mind, is another way to say it.
It goes on to say a little bit more about that. One should never be satisfied by gazing at the spiritual master because it is difficult to see spiritual masters. It is rare for them to appear on the earth, and it is difficult to meet them. And they go on to talk
Yeah.
about through service and offering food, clothes, bedding, seats, medicine, basically the necessities, even at the risk of one's body and life. And it's just restating the importance, is really what this is about.
And I would say that if you don't, at some point, the desire to do that will arise naturally, but before it does, just go ahead and do it anyway because it'll help.
Yeah.
Yep. The enlightenment, and then this is um, a quote from a story, Sri Sambhava's life story. I don't know who that is, but it says, "The enlightenment of a Buddha will be achieved through service to spiritual masters." That's pretty straightforward, huh?
Yeah.
Makes it kind of sound easy,
And it
almost.
really does imply that there is something to be received. There is an exchange happening. There's some sort of circumstance is being fulfilled by attending the teacher properly. That can't be it cannot be circumvented.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's I think what you said about the will to receive and the will to bestow. There's like a uh, I'm sure there's all sorts of ways to put it, but there's like an energetic circuit that has to be completed, and all there's like resistance in the circuit on your end, and you have to remove all of that resistance to fully for the energy to flow completely.
Oh no, don't get me started on like
Engineering.
electrical resistance metaphors and flows. We'll be here for a while.
I won't be able to follow you any further though. I don't know shit about it. So that was all. That was as far as I can get into it. Um, the next section, devotion and reverence. Um, To attend him through devotion and reverence means that one should regard the spiritual master as the Buddha. Um, it's especially easy if your spiritual master is a Buddha. One should not disobey his teachings. One should develop devotion, respect, and a clear mind. Oh, this is good. The example is the manner in which Naropa attended his spiritual masters. So Naropa is the guy that his teacher Talopa asked him to jump off a building, and he did. And a whole bunch of other crazy stuff like I don't know, y'all can look up the stories, but I think one time like Talopa they were out and about. I mean, Talopa's like kind of just a crazy Mahasiddha, just really didn't give a fuck about anything. But he I shouldn't say that, but they were doing something and there was like some group of people um and he told Naropa to go. I'm like gonna butcher the story, but he told Naropa to go like steal something from them, like go
Yeah, it was
steal a.
like rob a wedding party or something like that, knowing he was going to get his ass kicked.
So he does it and gets his ass kicked, and then Talopa heals him. So it's like, and I don't know if that was before or after him asking him to jump off the building, but he did that too and like broke both his legs. But then Talopa Talopa healed him too again. So I mean, it seems a bit ridiculous, but I don't know. You just have to get to that point, I guess. I don't. What else can you say about that?
It drives the point home, is all I can
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I mean, it just makes you. If you want to understand stuff like that, you have to go back to the fundamentals of like, what are we doing here? What is Dharma all about, and why are we doing it? And if you, I think it takes you out of the worldly level of like, oh, but why do I? I mean, there's all these excuses of why you shouldn't follow the spiritual master, but those excuses only hold weight when you forget what Dharma is all about, I think.
Yeah, when you forget that it's really a life and death training, then things like like impermanent beatings or whatever, like danger becomes a lot more important, and worldly things become a lot more important when you're not thinking on the scale of lives.
I guess it just occurred to me that maybe I should mention that, uh, well, our teacher speaks out often about inappropriate gurus or gurus who are he wouldn't call them gurus because they're quote unquote gurus. They're not real, but abusive practices and stuff like that. So we are not condoning that. Our teacher speaks out against it. We're not saying if your guru is hitting people, you should listen to him, but just to make that point, you still have to use discretion,
Yeah, still use your discernment.
especially when you're picking a teacher. Once you've selected a teacher to the best of your abilities, you really should try to do what they say. Um, so, and the final section of how to attend the spiritual master is, I don't know, in some ways it's the most obvious. Um, Practice and persistence, but really, the way I would paraphrase that is learn what the teacher's teaching and follow the method. I mean, because that's ultimately what this is about. It's not about some kind of like, it's not really about a hierarchical relationship where you have this person and you just do things that they say for no reason. The point is so you can attain that level.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's the goal of the teacher. The goal of the teacher isn't to have you circumambulating him or staring at him. They don't give a crap about that. They just want you to realize the nature of your mind. So,
Exactly.
so the ornament of Mahayana Sutra says, attending the spiritual master means practicing whatever is taught. By this he will be completely pleased.
Now, how do you feel about this word pleased in this context?
I think it's great.
I was feeling
It
like
makes
didn't really hit the mark, but it could just be my understanding.
really.
pleased because it
Mm.
sounds doesn't please sound like fleeting to you, and it also makes it
No.
seem like it's sort of like up to a whim or something like that. I don't know. I think what I would have I was looking for a different word, and maybe I was looking for satisfied,
Mm.
in that the spiritual master would not be satisfied with anything like with performance less than what he's being taught or what he's teaching.
Mm.
And it's not really about something shallow like pleasure, but this just could
Hmm.
be like a persnickety thing that's bothering me.
Yeah, I think that's your thing. I didn't get that vibe from it. I like it, and it makes me think of a Kabbalah story again, which I like to butcher stories, so I'm going to butcher this one. But well, it's kind of a metaphor where the creator has made like the perfect meal for you, right? And and he wants you to enjoy it fully. But the problem, and they use this story it's a teaching story, but um, the issue is if somebody has done everything for you and you show up to this meal that's like your favorite meal, it's your everything's perfect, and you know that they labored and like went through all this effort to try to make you happy, then you feel guilty. You actually can't enjoy it because you feel guilty that you haven't done anything, and the creator has given everything for you. So and they use this as a metaphor for basically the whole path, that you need to well, basically you need to purify your guilt by only wanting to bestow, and which is basically being a bodhisattva, only wanting to benefit other beings. And that when you get to that point, you you can enjoy the meal. Basically, if you're a Buddha, you eat the meal because you know that it gives the creator pleasure for you receiving everything that he wanted to give to you. And so that's kind of what I think about here, where it's like the teacher is pleased because you've taken everything that's on offer, which uh I mean in reality is everything is perfection, right? It's the great perfection is what's on offer, and that is what will please him for you to accept that gift, which in this case means actualizing the teachings.
And that is how in that instance that is how you give back by internalizing and following that direction.
Exactly, because the guru doesn't need anything. Gurus don't, I mean, you say God doesn't need anything. The creator, what does he need? What does the creator need? They don't need anything. But they want, and this is the same with the bodhisattva, is they want other beings to stop suffering. They want everybody to share the contentment or the peace that they have. So that is what pleases them.
You could even do, say, a metaphor with a doctor and a patient in this sense. Like they're giving you this bottle of medicine or spoonful of medicine, and it is not only what you need, but the correct amount.
Mm.
And you need to take it at certain times or whatever. You need to follow that direction explicitly. And only then will your doctor be satisfied with your part of the deal. Like they are giving the medicine, and your job is to take the medicine and follow directions.
Nice. All right. What else? Um, well, this very last bit. It's kind of like he hastily covers this. I don't know. We're probably going to learn a lot more about this later in the book, but 3 steps to receiving teachings from the spiritual master: preparation, the actual teachings, and the consequence. Um, oh, this is actually no, this is actually very relevant because Uh, well, and we did this today at the beginning of the session. So I'll read this. Preparation means to receive the teachings with bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So that's, and you'll find that pretty much in all Vajrayana texts that you open each practice with generating bodhicitta, just generating the right mind state. So that's preparation to receive the teachings. You could say it's preparing the vessel to receive the light.
Yeah.
And he brings up these there's so many like old Buddhist Dharma stories that like always keep coming back. But this is the one about the different deficiencies in a pot that you're trying to fill with like a nice beverage, right? If it's upside down, it can't hold anything. If it's leaking, it can't hold the teachings. And if it has poison in it, even if you just left one drop of poison, then it poisons the whole whatever you fill it with. So, um, and that basically, well, there's all sorts of ways you could have an improper vessel. Thinking you know the answer already is a great idea. Is a great way because that's well, then your pot is full of poison because you don't know the answer, but the spiritual master does. Um, but also not having established bodhicitta is basically you. I mean, I guess you can't you simply can't receive teachings if you have a selfish motivation. Like the light won't hit you.
Right. At the very least, it'll be twisted or obscured somehow. Like you won't perceive it correctly without the open heart aspect.
So yeah, that last bit it's sort of an afterthought because he doesn't really say that's basically the end of the chapter. He doesn't say much more about the actual teachings or the consequence, but of course that's the rest of the book. Um, I guess I'll just read these last two quotes from. This is from Sri Sambhava's life story, which maybe I should look up who this guy is. I don't know. There's so many stories. Noble family, a bodhisattva who is well guarded by spiritual masters will not fall into the lower realms. A bodhisattva who is escorted by spiritual masters will not fall into the hands of an evil person. A bodhisattva who is well guided by the spiritual master will not turn away from the Mahayana path. A bodhisattva who is well guided by the spiritual master will go beyond the ordinary person's level. And then the mother of the victorious one, perfection of wisdom, says, a bodhisattva, mahasattva, who is well guided by a spiritual master will quickly achieve unsurpassable complete enlightenment.
Yeah, I
So
wonder what
there
that
you have
means.
it. Well, yeah, we'd have to figure out what a mahasattva is. I know what a bodhisattva is, but what is a mahasattva?
That's got to be somebody who's perfectly attained, I imagine. Or, yeah, it's strange to
Maybe.
have Bodhisattva hyphen Mahasattva, who is well guided.
That goes the terminology. So in our lineage, we're very light on terminology. Like we use like a few of the most fundamental terms. We even, for example, like Baba used to use the term Rigpa quite often, but he never says that anymore. So there's kind of a process of like once you know what's being talked about, and of course we all speak English or mostly speak English in our sangha. There's a point where using terms in another language just doesn't. It just gets in the way, I think. So
Yeah.
we don't talk about mahasattvas. We we do use the word bodhisattva, but anyway, that's my excuse for not knowing what that means. And that does it. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think we covered it.
Awesome. So All right, guys, find a spiritual teacher. Do your
Until
best.
chapter 4.